Now I'm going to read from the Map of What Happened, and this is the book I wrote about growing up in Chicago in the 50s and 60s. I grew up on the South Side, and it was a wonderful way to grow up. It's a time that doesn't exist anymore. That's good and that's bad. It was sort of idyllic in a not so good way. And it was also wonderful in that it was a safer time. It was a wonderful way to grow up. I lived in a 4-flat that we rented. I never grew up in a house. Anyway, I wanted to save this time, and I wanted the book to talk about home, the one that we hold inside us, the home, the literal home that we live, and how that home changes, both of them, over time. Because our memories change and how we think about it changes over time. Anyway, I want to read from this one. The first poem I'm going to read, I lived in Brighton Park, which was not too terribly far away from back of the yards, from the Union Stockyards. And I also lived very close to what was Comiskey Park at that time, Sox Park. And even though I'm not going to read the poem about my grandfather, he used to sit on the back porch with his little transistor radio and listen to the White Sox games. And whenever they'd hit a home run, he could see the fireworks from the scoreboard, and he just loved that. He'd sit out there on hot summer nights. So that gives you some sense of kind of, if you know Chicago at all, that's kind of where I live. This one's called Union Stockyards, circa 1957. On my block, all we knew of it was when the blow blew it our way. The smell of fear and blood, a stink that meant work for so many. In winter, 2 shifts every day, 6 days a week, finger-whitening cold, bone-crushing gears, the slick machinery of death. Divided in their work as in their lives, the Irish ran the boardwalks, swatting flies, herding livestock in and out of pens. Mexicans dried and salted lambskins in the rank cool of hide cellars. The Poles and coloreds slipped on the killing floor. On my block, stump-fingered, steel-toed welders came home swinging domed lunch buckets in long arcs, and soup factory workers in white rowboat hats leaned on fences smoking. A hooked moon lifted, red. Legend has it, near the yards, families kept canaries to muffle panicked cries of animals, their sweet trilling high against the lowing dark, the gravity of disassembly. This poem, it's a shorter poem. It should give you a sense. The book is about the city, and it's also about my personal life. They're sort of intermingled in the book, and this will give you some sense of what my personal life was like. My mother died when I was 8 years old, so my grandparents were, my dad was there, but my grandparents were a big part of my life as well. Her winter house. It's always winter when I come. Curbs drifted in. The old man in his flannel gloves and woolen cap, burning garbage in the alley. Black ash butterflies flying up around his rosy face. And in the window, Nana's head bent, silver needle pulling light from one stitch to the next. My father working overtime, as much gone as my dead mother. Dusk brushes every window like a gray tide. Each time, I'm still a stranger, entering with snotty nose and chapped cheeks, listening for my own voice, tinny and lost as a chain-link gate clanging in December wind. And this one is another short one that I think also really speaks to childhood. And actually, what it's like for a lot of us. You don't have to have had my childhood, I think, to relate to this. Childhood. You could hear birds squawking through the open windows, frantic calls for flight or love or rain. We waded through the playground, an ankle-deep and dusty lake of pebbles that could skin bare knees and rattle palms of hands. I was never in harm's way, yet everything destroyed me. My skinny legs and sturdy shoes, how the sun reflecting off my glasses made tongues burn. There are songs to ruin you with their ringing flatline, sirens that unzip the sleeping dark, caged birds, bellies full of it, tearing feathers out, tilting to a cup of sky, wild blue they scream for. I came to school in Madison, but I dropped out a couple of times. It took me a while to get through school. And part of the reason I dropped out was because I had to earn money to come back. I put myself through school. And so I would go back and live with my grandparents in Chicago because I could make better money there than I could in Madison. And in 1965, I went back and had the great fortune to work for the Brazilian consulate. Which was wonderful. I was the first American they ever hired, and it was because I spoke Spanish, because they knew they'd never find anybody who spoke Portuguese. So they hired me, and it was wonderful, and I worked downtown, and this was actually during the Vietnam War, and that's where this poem came from. Teeth, wind, ice. Because it's winter in Chicago, I want to write teeth, so I do. Winter stars, sharp as incisors, chatter at a girl who runs for the morning Elbe. Slender as the tiny nameless hip bone, a chip of moon hangs high. Cold gloves her hands. At 19, she's all dream and weather, an urgency in that scrawny, half-lit patch between dark storefront and street light, sleep and desire. I want to write wind, so I do, because a waterlogged wolf howls through narrow concrete tunnels. Coat collar up, head down, she picks up her pace, spike heels tapping an irregular staccato on the sidewalk, a heavier left foot. Night begins to step back inside a fence of brick. The sky stutters toward gray. Against it, she seems to weigh nothing, less than a stalk of rice. I write ice because inside the Orange Line train, ice waxes windows. Across the aisle, a boy turns up his radio. 500,000 U.S. troops in Vietnam, death toll almost 30,000. Those surly boys she played with, then fell in love with, lost now in the mud and fire. She thinks death must smell and screech like breaking oily metal. Across the lake, day opens its narrow eye. It was a tough time for those of us who are old enough to have gone through that. I hope that anybody here who's young never has to experience a draft.